We're going to talk about olives being the most important part of the Sandhurst product range. The olives, we're drawing olives now from all over the world, including Greece, Turkey, Spain, and now even Australia. So we'll talk a little bit about olives and how they came to be and how the olive has evolved quite heavily in the Australian market over the past 30 to 40 years, as well as a bit of history and culture that you'll love to know about olives. So when we talk about olives, we talk about the two main schools. There's many different varieties, and I'm sure like me, you've been confused about the amount of olives you've seen on shelf. So the main products we talk about are the two schools of olives, which are the Spanish and the Greek olives. As an olive enters a market, it will generally be a Spanish style olive. And we call it a Spanish style olive because this olive did not originate in Spain. It actually originated in California. So in the early 1900s, the Californian University was playing with olives because they understood, well, they discovered that a green olive was not actually something they'd like to eat. The flavour profile was too strong. And so they had to develop a way to make the olive more palatable. So they developed the oxidisation process. Now the oxidisation process takes a green or a grey olive and then makes it black. Now oxidisation is a very simple process. It's no different to a banana. If you leave a banana out for long enough, it will go black, and because the olive is actually a fruit, it's not a vegetable, we know that because it grows on a tree, this will go black over time. Blackening happens in an olive on a tree, obviously, but if you take an olive which is unripe or basically a raw olive and you oxidise it using an oxidising process, you'll get a blackened olive. So when we open up these Spanish black olives, these are the ones that we import from Spain. You can see that the quality there is actually they're very, very attractive when you open them. And this is a classic Spanish black olive. So this is an olive which hasn't been dyed, but it's been oxidised. The oxidising process takes place where you actually push air through a large stainless steel vat, and the air runs through there continually for up to 3 or 4 days. That's called the oxidisation process. So what you end up with is a very, very black product, and if I cut this open, I should find a bit of grey inside, depending on how well the product's been oxidised. So and see there it is, there's a little bit of grey inside as well. So if you have a look at that, you can see that there's grey inside. The reason is because the black has been oxidised from the outside, and you don't always oxidise, you can't oxidise the middle because it is the core of it. This has been machine pitted, so machine pitting does about 3,000 or 4,000 olives a minute, and it uses a system whereby the olive goes through, each olive is selected, and they use a push pin to go through the olive. So that's why on one side you'll see a little cross. I don't know if you can see that, the cross on the back of the olive, and then you'll have the hole. So the pitting process works on pushing that olive through a rounded knife, and in that rounded knife is a facility for the seed to go on one side and the olive to stay on this side. There's a barrier, and that's the system. These are very easy to pit because they're very firm. So the firmer the olive, the easier it is to pit, and the more round it is, the easier it is to pit as well. So this is a perfectly round olive. This variety here, and I'll have to taste it for you, so I'll tell you what variety it is. It's Hoja Blanca. So Hoja Blanca or Hoja Blanca is a Spanish variety, which is quite firm and quite meaty. If this was a manzanilla, it'd be a bit soft, a little bit more subtle, and they generally leave the manzanillas for the premium green olives. Manzanilla means apple in Spain, and they're more a prized olive. But the Hoja Blanca or Hoja Blanca is a very robust olive and very good for black. And I know the region these come from, which is in the Seville area, that Cordoba Seville area, which is where these olives are famous for. If you go north of Seville, you'll end up in a place called Extremadura, which has got a different type. It's a Manzanilla casareña, which is a little bit softer, but these are definitely from the south of Spain. So I think they're actually quite nice. I mean, people say, how can you eat them? But they're actually quite nice olives. So the oxidising olive was the one. The reason why you oxidise them, number one, is to change the flavour profile, but also you get the product quicker to market. So if this is picked traditionally around about October, November, it can be ready by December. While in December, the Greek olive is still going black on a tree. So the olive will blacken on a tree in Greece. It will take longer because it's a more natural process. So this is the main Spanish olive, and you've probably seen these. If we were to slice these up, I'm sure you'd be very familiar with what you see now, which is the Spanish sliced olive. And there you go. You've seen this a million times. And you've seen them on Subway, and you've also seen them on pizza. So there is the classic Spanish sliced black olive. That's what it looks like. So you'll find that is what you'll find on your pizza. And any market where they want olives for decoration, and we talk about real estate in pizza, because you want to cover that. See, I've actually cut that into 4 pieces, but I could probably get that into probably 4 to 5 pieces. So one olive can cover this much area, whereas just if I used one olive on a pizza, I'm only covering this much area. So there's a big difference there. So by doing that, I'm allowing the olive to disperse on the product or in the salad, and I'm creating the idea of volume. Food service concepts then translate into retail. The unfortunate thing about this olive, the Spanish black olive, used to be about probably 60 to 70% market share in Australia when I first started. Now the Spanish olive is probably around about 20 to 30% market share. Unfortunately, for them, their product was not as well accepted as the Greek style olive, which took the market by storm. This is a much cheaper product than the Greek olive because it's more mass produced. This is more of an industrial product, whereas the Greek olive is more of a boutique. And I'm happy to say the Australian olive are following the Greek tradition of having very, very natural olives. And I believe the Australian olives are even more natural than the Greek olives because they're not using a lot of the accelerated fermentation techniques. It's very much chemical free. The only chemicals, or not chemicals, the product they put in this is called ferrous gluconate, which is an iron derivative, or they call it Fergon sometimes. Ferrous gluconate, which is a product which retains the black colour. It's put out to fix the colour. The other thing about these olives is the pH of these, if you're in the world of pH and acidity, is quite high. The reason why the pH is quite high is so the colour is fixed. If we pull the pH down below 4.5, then the product will actually go grey. So we've actually done that, we'll repack those into a citric brine and they turn grey. So the high pH means that the product is actually very, very black, but by doing that as well, this product will have to be sterilised. Now, sterilisation takes the product up to a very high temperature, usually about 120 degrees for about 40 minutes, to ensure that this product is fully sealed and we've killed all the bacteria. The reason why they do this is because in the early 1900s, there was some cases of food poisoning with olives, where they actually ended up killing some people because they didn't have the correct sterilisation. So all olives that are black must be put through a retort or an autoclave, which means they have to go to a very high temperature for a certain period of time, and it's almost like a big pressure cooker. So as we use linear pasteurisation or a pasteurisation tunnel, the Spanish will use autoclaves, which are basically it's a chamber, and they push the olives in there, and then they actually physically have to time them. And this ink on the top there will actually change colour as well. So under autoclaving or under sterilisation, the ink goes from a black to a pinky colour, and that's a special ink they've used for that. And the reason why they do that is they know what has been sterilised, because it's pretty much against the law to actually send a product out without sterilisation, which is Spanish, which is the different process. In Australia, we don't produce any of these products. They're all produced in Spain, and they're all original pack in Spain. We don't have autoclave facilities here, so we leave it to the experts. So our packer in Spain, our co-packer in Spain, is the second largest olive packer in the world, and they ensure that the quality systems are very, very rigid. So we make sure that this product is very, very safe by having it packed in Spain. And of course, then we actually also have it in a 2 kilo jar already direct from Spain. These are whole, and these are sold pretty much in the fruit markets as well as places like Costco and things like that. Now, the Kalamata olive is grown in Greece. It's also grown in Australia. They have tried to grow Kalamata olives around the world. There was some made in Chile, which were actually quite good. They seem to have disappeared. Turkey and Argentina has also tried to grow Kalamata olives, but with limited success. I'm happy to report that the best Kalamata olives, even coming out of Greece or outside of Greece, are actually Australian. So in Australia, we've got very good quality Kalamata olives. Reason being is because we've got climate, but we also use older preservation techniques. It's no different to some of the Italian food in Australia is actually better than in Italy, because they're still using the old ways of preserving and presenting and cooking and things like that. So when I first started in '91, there was no such thing as pitted Kalamata olives. So believe it or not, pitted Kalamata olives only really came on the scene in the mid-90s. And the first thing we had to do was travel over to Greece and convince the Greeks to pit their olives. And the Greeks said, why would you want to pit an olive? We said, because people prefer them pitted. And if you look at the history of the olive in America in particular, the way that the Spanish stuffed olive entered the market in America in the early 50s was they presented a product which was more user-friendly. So this followed history perfectly. So when the Spaniards couldn't enter the American market in the early 50s, they said, we're going to pit the olive, and then we're going to put something inside it to make it look nice, which was a pimento or a capsicum. And then they present them to the Americans, and the Americans love them because they're a more user-friendly product. So if you look at the way an olive enters the market, if you've got a wider application of product, then you will actually increase that market. So fortunately, the Greeks invested heavily in pitting lines, and I remember there was probably only about 2 or 3 packers that would actually do pitted Kalamata, and the Greeks would be very, very defensive of their sacred Kalamata. Going through the Greek markets and looking at the olives being sold to the market, you would find no pitted olives. I think now you probably start to find pitted olives because the younger generation travels and they appreciate more of a pitted olive. So looking at the difference between Australian pitted and a Greek pitted, straight away away you can see that there are slight differences, but for the uninitiated, there's very, very little difference. The Greek Pitta Kalamata is definitely a softer olive. And these ones here are probably coming from the south of Greece, which are probably more closer to the probably coming from from different areas of Greece. But the ones from the south of Greece are a little bit more firm, whereas the ones in the north of Greece are a little bit softer. So the Australian ones look like the northern Greek ones. The Australian product is actually very, very similar in terms of texture. In fact, it's quite surprising these are actually firmer than the Greek ones. So they would normally be softer. The reason why they're softer is because under irrigation, you can pump the olive tree full of water and you'll get a softer olive. The best olives are the ones that grow on the sides of mountains. So by getting that mountainside olive, it's actually struggling for water, so it ends up with a very, very hearty product. But try and pick an olive on the side of a mountain. Certainly, that's the other thing. In Australia, they do all mechanical harvesting, so these Australian olives have been harvested with a machine, whereas most of these Greek olives have been picked by hand. But even now, a lot of olives are being picked by machine. But picking by hand gives a very, very different product as well, and there's less bruising as well. So in terms of the taste profile, they're very, very similar, and so the quality difference will vary. What you understand about olives, they are natural. So you'll get taste variations, flavour variations. Not every olive is the same. They're like human beings. Everybody's different. So in the olive world, we talk about the characteristics of an olive, when it was picked, where it was picked, how we've packed it, and how long it's been in the jar. Under pasteurisation, we do lose a little bit of texture, but with Sandhurst, we have a different pasteurisation technique now, where we're using more of a slow pasteurisation, and we're trying to do it at lower temperatures. We're still getting commercial sterilisation, but we're doing it at a much better temperature. So we think we're getting better texture on the product to avoid the mushiness of olives. So they're the two main varieties of the Kalamata that we sell, the Australian and the imported. And like I said, sometimes the Greek one will be firmer, sometimes the Australian one will be firmer. Generally, it varies by batch, and the other thing is depending on the season. For example, in Australia, we're getting Pitta Kalamatas now. It's November, December. We're getting the new season right now, whereas in Greece, their season will start in January. In Greece, they'll ferment in 2 months. In Australia, they will ferment over in a period of 5 months. So the slow curing is actually a very big part of it as well. So that's the Greek olive. So the other olives we talk about is things like Sicilian greens. Now, Sicilian green olives are very, very different, and this olive was developed in Sicily probably about 40, 50 years ago by the Neapolitans. So the Neapolitans, which have a very big love of street food and a big love of olives, developed the Sicilian style green olive. Now, this olive was designed by the Neapolitan traders, which would travel down to Sicily to bring olives up, because the Neapolitans would want olives for Christmas, and this is a Christmas olive. So it's designed to be picked in October, to coincide with the religious festivals, and then from October to November, and in November there's the All Saints and All Souls Day, which corresponds with the last of the picking, the last of the processing. The difference between these Sicilian greens is that they use a technique. Using soda, or caustic soda, and what that does is that actually takes the bitterness out of the olive straight away. The variety of this olive is called Noccellata di Bellice, which is Noccellata is the variety, so it is actually a Sicilian variety, and Bellice is the valley. The valley of Bellice is the valley where they come from. So the beautiful thing about these olives is they are 100% Sicilian. They're not Sicilian style. They're actually full Sicilian olives. So these are what DOC, or Denomination Origin Control Sicilian olives. So what they'll do is they take the fresh olives and they'll put them in a very strong soda solution, or soda ash, or lye solution they call it, which is highly alkaline. That removes the bitterness straight away, and what we're looking for is the sweetness of the olive. So they do call them oliva dolce, which is sweet olive. That's what they call these olives in Italian. And so what they'll then do is they'll then take the bitterness out, and then they'll start replacing that soda with a little bit of salt, a little bit of acid. The reason why they taste different is because they don't take them to the salt and acid levels of the traditional Spanish olives. The traditional Spanish olives have elevated salt and elevated acid, which makes them very salty and very acidic. These ones will have limited, but the compromise is they have to be refrigerated or pasteurised. So by refrigerating and pasteurising, and it actually happens to coincide with a drop in temperature in Italy. So once again, everything is done for a reason. So these olives are designed to be consumed between November, pretty much fresh, December, January, March, and then pretty much round about Easter, they're pretty much gone, because under the old rules where there was no refrigeration, of course. By March, when the weather started to heat up, then they would be gone from the market, and then you'd be moving on to the more traditional black olives that have been slow cured. So in Italy, there's an olive for every part of the year, and this is the olive for the Christmas, which is the famous sweet olives from the street. The other thing that the Italians love is very, very bitter olives. So if you go more inland into Italy, they'll have more bitter olives, and the bitter the olive, which means it's actually fresher. So people think that bitter olives are actually off. They're actually not. They're actually fresh. It's a common misconception that the more bitter the olive is, the more fresh it is. And once again, fresh or bitter olives are consumed around about the time of collection, October, November, coinciding with the onset of winter, so they're a more hearty meal, whereas a more salty olive is more of a summer olive, if you like. So the olive changes as the weather changes, and so it should. So what we notice about this olive is it's actually quite firm, and the flesh is very hard. And to cut that olive, you'll get a lot of resistance, but they are what we call clingstone. So by being a clingstone product, it actually sticks to the seed, and that's a characteristic of this olive as well. Whereas another olive, for example, the Kalamata, is more freestone, so it'll release quite easily. And the other thing, this has got a fairly big seed, whereas the Kalamata's got a nice thin seed as well, and the seed is pointed. So when we talk about olive education, we talk about how the shape of the seed and the shape of the leaf of the plant as well. So we always talk about how important that is in terms of identifying this product. Interesting thing about this olive is it will probably have about 50 names. So the same name there'll be 50 names for the same olive, essentially, and it depends on what town you came from, and depends on what farmer you're speaking to, because the same tree might be in a different area, and he'll call it one thing and they'll call it another thing. So the Italians have a lot of names. So in the book of olive cultivars, there is thousands and thousands of names, and many times 100 names for one particular olive. They're all genus Oliva Olea Europea, which is the genus and species, but they're all different varieties, which is interesting. So that's the Sicilian green, very popular. And the reason why they're popular as well is because they've got a very buttery taste. So when you eat them, they've actually got a really nice buttery, almost almond flavour. The salt is very, very minimal, and they crunch really well. So you've actually got a really nice crunch in your mouth. So beautiful olives, really nice. The Sicilian greens, they're a really quite a pleasant olive. And once again, if you eat them with salads or you're having them with pasta, they eat really, really well. The rainbow olives is actually an invention of Sandhurst. So this was a patented product that we invented probably about 10 years ago. The word rainbow obviously means that they're multicoloured. The variety is called Bella di Cerignola, which is only from the Foggia region. So like the Sicilian olives, it is an area of Italy which grows this type of olive. So Bella di Cerignola, or rainbow olives as we call them. They originally came in 4 colours. We've actually brought it back down to 3 colours, because the red was using a colour which we didn't really want to be associated with, which was a tomato colour, but it wasn't exactly one that we'd want to have as the main colour. So the main colours of this are the black, the yellow and the green. So they still are the 3 main colours. The black uses the same technique as the Spanish. So it's actually an oxidised product. So it actually uses that classic oxidising product process, which is the ferrous gluconate, which is the same as the Spanish, but when you cut it, you'll find that there is a much different colour inside. So you'll find that the colour changes inside quite dramatically. See, there you go. There's the colour difference. So that's the black. So that's your classic black. And then you've got yellow and your green, but your yellow is not yellow, it's actually light green. So all they do with the yellow is they use different types of acids to pull up the colour. So if you use a small amount of acid, you'll get a green, but if you use a lot of acid, ascorbic and citric together, you get a yellow, and so they'll look actually bright yellow, but it's actually a light green. So they're the 3 colours in the rainbow olives. Once again, they're a bit firmer, and sometimes the skin comes off a little bit, and that's because the acids are sort of working. But eating-wise, they're a nice olive, and they're very similar taste profile to Sicilian greens, but they've got their own flavour of their own, because they're a bigger olive and they've got a bit more sort of meatiness, and their oil content's slightly different as well. So that's the main olives in the sort of the Italian school. So Bella Cerignola, and we're also looking at other new olives as well from southern Italy. So there's new ones coming out all the time, which actually are old ones, which are from regions of Italy. So the beautiful thing about Italy is they're discovering all the old olives now, and they're bringing them back from the dead, if you like. So the ones that were forgotten many, many years ago. So we're going back in time, which is nice. The other other thing that Sandhurst did originally was to marinate olives. So we were the first company to marinate commercially olives, to do a commercial marination of olives. So the first thing we did was do these buckets of marinated olives back in the 90s. Like everything, if you put garlic, parsley, spices, you put it in an olive, you'll end up with a different flavoured product. So we originally sold these vacuum marinated olives in many places, and this is still the original sort of vacuum marinated in the bags, which still sells okay, but more and more people are liking the product in a fancy jar, and that's what we bring in from Greece, and that's marinated to our specification. So we've used our own spec to actually marinate this product. So they've used the garlic and the rosemary and the parsley to give it a beautiful marination. These are the ones we pack here using our recipe as well. So it depends on which product the customer wants. And they're essentially the same recipe, and very similar olives as well. They're all Greek style olives, so there's no Spanish, and we use our own recipe of garlic, parsley and herbs to actually give a nice flavoured marination. In some cases we use lemon and garlic as well as a marination if people don't like chilli. So they're the two main schools of marinated olives. There's the chilli garlic school, then there's the lemon and garlic one for those people that want a more subtle marinade. And so that's basically the marinades. What's become popular as well is the green olive recently, which is nice. So these ones here are whole queen green olive. So you can see the quality of the olive in there, which is really quite nice. These have become very popular because of the fact that we can sell them pitted, and then people will stuff things inside them. They'll put feta cheese or sun-dried tomatoes. The most famous stuffed olive is the Ascolana, which comes from Ascoli Piceno in Italy, where they actually stuff them with parmesan and veal. And then they crumb them and fry them. So that's a very popular product in Italy. But the green olives are used, the ones we're mainly buying are from Greece. The variety is called Halkidiki, and they are from the north of Greece, and that's a very specific variety. The reason you can tell a Halkidiki, it's got a little nub on the end, it's got a little point on the end, and that's how you can tell what a Halkidiki looks like, which is unlike any other olive that you can commercially find, whereas the Spanish ones are very round, whereas the Halkidiki are very pointy, and the Halkidiki have got a very high oil content, so they're very strong in flavour as well, so they're quite nice.
Most of our olives come from either Australia or overseas, these big drums. So every day we open up probably about 80 to 100 of these drums, and what we then do is we then open the drum up and the olive is inside under brine. So it's important that we make sure the brine levels are correct, and we test each one of these drums to make sure the product is of the quality that we like. If the product doesn't meet our quality standard, then it gets rejected, sent back to the supplier. Even if the supplier's in Greece, we'll test these. There's a few parameters we go through. We go through taste, smell, visual. We do a test on the olives to make sure that every drum of olives contains the right quality that we expect here at Sandhurst. So what we've got here is some pitted Kalamata, which we're using for processing. So the quality here has to be quite good. These are a blacker variety, so they're the darker colour ones that we normally use. And these are used for our specific marinated mixed olives. So we're using a bigger size and a much darker fruit. The ones we would use for other olives, we would also use different colours as well, so we can get different blends and colours in the olives as well. That's a very nice raw material, and that would go into some of our marinated mixed product as well.